Hello everyone, and welcome to our virtual event, Youth in Action, Environmental Activism Through Engaged Art. My name is Apurva, and I am a second-year member of the Youth Leadership Council from New Jersey. Ameilia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Ameilia. I'm 16, I'm from San Francisco, and I'm an EarthEcho Water Challenge Ambassador. We are so excited to host this virtual event along with our partners at Scientist in Every Florida School.
Scientist in Every Florida School is a free program aimed at building long-term collaborative relationships between teachers and scientists to better integrate current scientific research and data into classrooms. We encourage you to check out all the programs and opportunities available, including how to request a scientist visit to your school.
EarthEcho International is a global nonprofit founded on the belief that youth have the power to change our planet. Reaching more than 2 million people in 146 countries worldwide, we provide original content, immersive experiences, and trusted resources to empower young people to become leaders and problem solvers in their communities and around the world.
Just a reminder that you can send in questions anytime for our expert, and we will answer those throughout today's event. Please use the comment section on YouTube to ask your questions. Now we'd like to turn it over to today's guest, Xavier Cortada. Welcome, Xavier.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure being with you here today and sharing a little bit about the power of art to really transform society. And Picasso used to say that children had art, but by the time they got to be adults, they sort of lost it. I want to add a little bit to that. I actually want to add two things to that. One, everyone, no matter the age group, is an artist. And two, youth have the power, the passion, and the relevance to remind everyone, including adults, that they are artists, which means that they have a creative spirit through which they can share their ideas to inspire other people to share their ideas and make that action. I call that socially engaged art. And what I want to talk to you about today, although you'll see a little painting and a little drawing, is the idea of engaging other people as a form of art, inspiring the kids in your school to do better by the environment. That action, that performance, that activity, I call art. The same way that people on a stage can put a play and you call that theater, kids in a high school or a middle school can put up a program and you call that engaged art. Instead of you being on stage watching people move and listening to them, you are on the campus having people work with you together. And what you're doing is not a play, but life, real life. You're bringing ecosystems back. And importantly, you are becoming a little bit more curious about what you're doing. You're getting your friends to become curious about what they're doing. They're going to learn more. They're going to work with you. They're going to bring their parents in. And before you know it, you have something really remarkable. Just like when you have a play on stage, everyone go home and talk about it. Here, everyone in the community will be talking about it and wanting to make it better. I'm going to show you how I did that with some projects here in Miami. Miami, Florida, as you know, is on the water, and we have wetlands, mangrove forests. So I'm going to show you how I used my ideas to engage other people so that they could also amplify what I was doing through their own ideas and action. So I'm going to start with a project that I created called the Reclamation Project, which gave light to the project that we're in today. The important thing for you to know is that these are projects that started a very long time ago, and they're still alive. They're still functioning. They're still working. In 2004, I was asked by the city of Miami to create the Miami Mangrove Forest. The Miami Mangrove Forest was my way of taking an old highway and painting mangroves, these little seedlings that used to be where that highway is, but weren't anymore. That Miami Mangrove Forest inspired people into action. I did that at an exhibit that was happening that same time where I took the columns of the highway, but instead of painting mangroves on them, I actually showed these little mangroves, the mangroves that would have grown at that location had we not paved it with asphalt and concrete. This idea of mine of showing live plants in an art exhibit inspired individuals not just to take those drawings that I had in the exhibit and paint them on the wall, but to actually create an idea of these mangroves coming back to reclaim their community. I did that initially by putting these little mangroves as seeds in places where humans are, but where they used to be, right? This mangrove can't live in a chlorinated pool. This mangrove can't even grow at the water's edge because there's a seawall blocking it. So the reclamation project was the beginning of this movement that I created, where people would go out and collect mangroves at the water's edge. I would bring kids and families and PTAs into a mangrove forest. They would understand that there is wilderness right outside their yards. They would collect the mangroves. They would look at the beautiful light filtering through it. They would understand the role of mangroves. They would collect them and they would hang them in these grid forms. To me, the grid form was important because I wanted to remind us that what we now have as rows and columns is a metaphor for what was there before. Ideally, it would all be wetlands, but we've taken those wetlands and we divided them into streets and avenues. And by having these rows and columns made of man-made objects, clear cups, clips, metal screws on a concrete wall, that was a metaphor for a city block, a city neighborhood. The idea of it all being gridded out with rows being the streets and columns being the avenues. But what my volunteers did is they put nature back into the environment. They took these mangroves, these little propagules that they went into the wilderness and collected with me, and they grew them in these vertical nurseries. This was a remarkable view. Why? Because it was weird. It would make you say, hey, what's that? Why is that growing on a wall? What is that? And that idea of asking the question allowed you to have a little curiosity about what were these artists and what were these people doing. What we were doing was creating a movement, reminding people that the asphalt, the glass, the neon, the concrete that you saw is not the way it used to be. It used to be nature. And then afterwards, we would take those seedlings and we would go back and plant them in habitats, creating ecosystems above and below the waterline, because mangroves not only support the avian life and the land animals above its roots, but of course, there's an entire ecosystem below it. And this was the campaign that we used and took to a bunch of schools, but we realized that not every school had the opportunity to go to the coastline because some schools were farther inland. So then we created another project where we would plant not water or wetland plants, but we would plant inland plants. And that project was called Native Flag. So here we are at the Science Museum, and one half of that wall over there was dedicated to the mangroves. And this side of the wall, we had a living exhibit. We had flags painted for each of 12 specimens of native trees that people will plant at home. As you know, native trees are important because the animals in our communities co-evolved with these trees. So they actually need the fruits and the flowers from these trees to be able to pollinate, to create fruit, and to create our beautiful ecosystem of life. So you could plant a tree in your front yard and people who don't care about trees wouldn't notice. But if instead you were to plant a flag in your front yard next to a tree, then people would say, what is that all about? Well, that prompted me to create this project at the North Pole, way up there, top of the world, where I planted a green flag because, as you know, trees capture carbon, and through this beautiful process of photosynthesis, that carbon becomes part of its bark and the oxygen comes out of its leaves. So it cleans the atmosphere. So if people were to plant more trees in the world below and plant a green flag next to it to let people know that they were planting green flags, And then if everyone down the block were planting green flags next to their trees, then you would have all of this carbon that would be collected, sequestered is the word, and oxygen would go out into the atmosphere, making the North Pole less vulnerable to the consequences of climate change, which traps heat in this huge sweater that surrounds our planet. This carbon sweater, we call that the greenhouse gases that makes our planet too hot for animals to survive. So I would take this project to schools and I would teach kids about the lessons I just told you now. And they would plant a native tree, in this case, a school in Hialeah, one of the cities here in Miami, planted a sea grape. Next to the sea grape, they planted our flag. We even asked every single member of Congress to plant a flag and a tree in their congressional districts because, as you know, plants are native to their ecosystems. So the plants that you would plant in Oregon are completely different from the ones you would plant in Georgia. So the idea was that these elected officials would model that behavior across their communities so that their communities could then plant the plant of their choice. Here in North Miami, an oak tree was planted, but importantly, every kid got a tree and a flag for them to also plant at home to get their neighbors to do the same. And that's what I mean about engaged art. It's not just planting a tree at school. It is modeling that idea at a school so that others take a little bit of that school back home with them and grow the ideas that you created in the school in the community. So in a sense, it's almost as if your teacher trains you, then you become a teacher, then you train your friends, they become teachers, they train friends you don't even know, they become teachers, they train a neighbor who doesn't even go to your school, they become teachers, and little by little your idea grows. But you need something to capture people. In this case, the green flag did it. Again, if you planted the tree by itself, people wouldn't talk about it. But by planting this green flag and saying, I hereby reclaim this land for nature, almost as you were a reverse conquistador, bringing wilderness back to a place that now has lawn, is an interesting thing that people talk about. So we did this all over the place in museums, botanical gardens, until 2019 when we decided to go back to the mangrove and plant that very mangrove. Again, remember the mangrove doesn't grow in high altitude, in uplands. It grows at the water's edge. But Miami has a particular problem. We have a problem with sea level rise, which means that the water beneath our feet is getting salinated. So my team would collect mangroves, but instead of going and planting them at the water's edge, we would give them away to people in the community. People would come in and they would learn that their homes, which were miles away from the coastline, had the aquifer, the underwater caves, right? The subterranean caves that have water flow. When the rain falls, it trickles all the way down. That's where we get our drinking water. That's how agriculture has water to water our tomatoes. You know, the aquifer is our fresh water. That fresh water was getting salinated because sea level rise caused by that blanket of carbon that's around the atmosphere called the greenhouse gases, caused by our pollution through flying airplanes, driving cars, turning on the lights, and using fossil fuels in a world where fossil fuels are still dominant. Because of that, because fossil fuels create greenhouse gases that warm the planet, that melt the North Pole area glaciers, like the ones in Greenland, that cause that water to raise our seas, the heat that expands water with expanded temperature, the water molecules expand. As water rises, salt water rises, that water gets underneath our caves and makes our fresh drinking water salt water. And remember, the mangroves were the trees that live at the water's edge because they have been adapted through time to be able to be salt tolerant. So as an art project, and here's the important part for you to understand, as an art project, we created something a little strange. We're telling you, plant a tree that grows at the water's edge in the salt water, a tree that has fish swimming under its roots because it lives on the water. Plant that tree in your front lawn, because in the future, the water is going to rise and your front lawn may be underwater. No one's thinking about that. That's so far away. That's 30, 50, 60 years away. I'm not going to worry about that. But if you see a mangrove every day you go home, and right before you open the door to pet your dog, there's a tree that normally lives in the water, but is now living in your front yard because it can tap the salt water under your feet, the aquifer. And soon, again, decades from now, the other plants, when they try to drink that water, it's going to be salty, so they are not going to survive. You create an art project where you inform individuals through art about their vulnerability. So here, there's an app. We ask them to put their home address. The home address tells them what the elevation is, how many feet above sea level their home is. In this case, this family is at 12 feet above sea level. And then we give them a mangrove to plant next to that flag in their front yard. It's not like the green flags where you're planting trees that normally belong there, trees that were there in the past but are no longer there. Here, this art project is asking you to plant trees from the future, trees that will eventually grow there in the future. Again, the trees aren't there anymore because humans cut them down. That humans cutting all those trees down and creating fossil fuels is causing our planet to change, so that the trees from the future are being brought there now, so that you can visualize the change that's coming and act on it to make a difference. This is what Miami looks like at almost 10 feet above sea level. All these dark blue places that you see inside the gray, those are people's houses and hospitals and schools and businesses. So my job as an artist, my idea is to have you see this, get inspired by it, and then you generate an idea how you're going to work with your neighbors, your homeowners association, your elected officials, your churches, your synagogues, your civic groups, your clubs, to try to figure out what can we do to address this problem. So we take these installations and we hang them at schools. And imagine you hanging these at schools, and everything I'm telling you right now, you're telling your buddy from 4th grade or your classmate from 11th grade. You are acting as I'm acting, but you have all the info because you saw my lecture, but now you started doing all this research about climate change, carbon sequestration, mangroves, deforestation, fossil fuels, clean energy, electric cars, right? You start becoming an expert. Why? Because your whole school is looking to you. Why? Because you just did this marvelous art piece. You just did this incredible art piece in front of your classmates. They're inspired. They stop. Who did that? Oh, it's the art club. Oh, it's the science club. They start asking you about this thing. You create an activity where they become engaged. Maybe you have the kids come and every kid plants a mangrove propagule inside the cup. So they walk by there the entire semester and say, oh, that's my little mangrove. Maybe they give it a name. But the idea that through art, you create this process where people start interacting with one another. We also do this exact project at schools, at libraries. Every single library, for instance, in Miami-Dade County had one of these installations. So imagine that. Your school is near this library. Now you're not just impacting the 7th graders, you're impacting the seniors from high school that study at that library, and you're impacting people who don't even go to public schools, that go to private schools, that go to community college, that go to universities. See the impact that your idea can have? So your idea starts small, you get a bunch of people inspired by it, and then you grow it and you grow it and you grow it. That's what engaged art is. And I hope you see how much more productive and impactful it is to do this than to paint the most beautiful photorealistic painting of a mangrove, right? Because that painting of a mangrove is basically a conversation that's passive. The participant has little to do. Maybe they're motivated, but it's a passive conversation. Your work stops the second you sign that painting. You're done as an artist. But if instead your job is to have people realize the vitality and importance of mangroves, then you're a relevant artist. You're an artist that's not generating a beautiful object. You're generating ideas and movements, and you are listened to. Because all of us as adults, we care about only one thing, you. We care about your futures. We want to make sure that you're safe. We love you dearly. So if you tell us, hey, adults, we need this because we want to live in a world where the carbon dioxide, the pollutants in the atmosphere are not hurting our lungs. We need to live in a world where I can actually see ecosystems and they're not collapsing, right? We need to live in a healthy world. They will listen to you, but you have to have your voice amplified, and art is the best way that you can do that. So here's an example of that little mangrove planted in front of someone's home. Right now, the trees behind it are growing there happily, but Miami knows that many years from now, in this particular home's case, within the next 100 years, guaranteed, that seedling will be living in water. That's a problem. It's a problem all of us have to face. So we create the campaign. We ask people to let others know. You're young and you have all sorts of social media contacts, from, I don't even know the names of these things, but you have all your apps from Snapchat to TikTok to Instagram, right? So what you do is you create your idea, and it doesn't, most of you don't live anywhere near a mangrove, so you're not doing this project, but you create your idea and then you find ways that engage other people so they get excited about it, and then you amplify it. One very important part of this entire calculus is to penetrate through all the world that makes it all look like everything is okay, right? That there is no problem. There's a spectacle, like you're almost lulled into thinking that it's fine. I'm breathing air, it's okay, right? So the way you do that in a world with billions of people and lots of television channels and lots of personal individual conversations about what my hair looks like or what I ate for dinner, right? The way you penetrate that sometimes is through mass media. So you create a campaign that is clever enough that the media now starts to amplify your voice. So it's no longer just the kid from 4th grade or 7th grade or 11th grade. It's no longer the college kid that walked into the library. It's no longer your neighbor, but now people you've never heard of are understanding your idea. And if you do that, you will be a valuable, valuable contributor, an engaged citizen, a science literate citizen, and most importantly, an empathetic and loving citizen. And if you, through your actions, can get others to follow your lead, then you have a beautiful life in front of you. Thank you very much. This is my presentation, and it was my pleasure to share it with you. I'm happy to have been given the opportunity to speak with you here today.
Thank you very much. That was really amazing and interesting, because I often think of art as I think of drawing or painting or something really visual, but I never realized how impactful it could be if everyone is engaged in it and the viewer also has like a role to play in the artwork.
Absolutely. That is, in many ways, I think, what makes 21st century art. And I would argue that everyone who's listening to us was born in the 21st century, except for the teachers and me. And that is different from 20th century art, right? So in the 20th century, objects were still very important. I mean, we had, as an art world, we were moving across. I started by quoting Picasso, who at the beginning of the last century broke the mold, right? On art, bringing in modernism. And that clearly had a bunch of other art movements that through time questioned even what the role of art was. But in many ways, until about the 60s, it was very much about optics, right? I'm telling you, the 21st century is about ideas. And ideas don't live without them being shared. You can write a book, and if no one ever reads that book, you never shared it, right? So you can create an art piece, but if that art piece is static and doesn't have any impact, in a world where art is about ideas, you've created a very small piece. So by engaging others and letting that idea shape itself as others take it on, you do it. I'm going to give you an example. One of the people in the audience, maybe we can bring him in, is Adam Roberti. Adam Roberti is the manager of my studio. It's the Cortada Socially Engaged Art Lab and Studio. And Adam, by the way, he's wearing a mask because he's in a public space. I'm here at home, so I don't wear a mask. I hope that all of you who are in a public space clearly are wearing masks. But as manager of my studio, his job, Ameilia, is to do just what you asked, is to find ways of engaging others. And what he has done for us is, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've worked with the co-sponsor of this event, right? With our Florida scientists in every classroom in implementing the plant project.
Hey guys, yeah, happy to talk about it. Good to be here with you. So I worked with scientists in every Florida school to bring plant to schools across South Florida. And, they're an amazing partner for us because they understand the value of art in communicating the science. And everybody who we really talk to about the plant project gets excited about it because they see the potential for it to really change minds and pique curiosity, like Xavier was talking about. So I worked with them to teach some of the teachers and how those teachers could bring the plant project into their school and how their students could participate and be, a protagonist, be someone who is a participant and active. And again, I'm just kind of echoing what Xavier was saying a little bit ago, but when you're passive and you're just, let's say, looking at a painting, you are not necessarily as motivated or activated to do anything. But if you're actually given a sense of agency, if you're actually making a decision or doing something, you play a role. Now you talk to your friend or you talk to your family member about it, and then it spreads. And so that's something that has gotten a lot of people excited about this project, and that's why so many people, for example, have posted the picture of their mangrove with their little flag, with the number, the elevation above sea level on there. So it's been really cool to watch the progress of the project and work with partners like scientists in every Florida school.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start out with a question because I am really interested in both art and climate and environmental activism. And so how would you suggest that me or other people as youth could get involved in projects like yours?
So Adam, since you do so much work, not just with my groups, but also with environmental groups, why don't you take it through the angle of bringing art into environmental organizations?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and what I would say is think about who, like you guys probably know the Sunrise Movement, right? Or you may have heard of like Fridays for Future. Right? There's a number of nonprofits or organizations that are generally trying to do the same thing, whether that's raise awareness or get climate policy changed. But how do we really make that happen? And so to answer your question, how does one person do this? It's it's being creative, it's coming up with ideas, it's thinking about how you can use the partners or the groups that you have. So it's thinking about like, okay, who do I work with or who could I work with? Like we worked with the library systems, right? So we infiltrated the libraries, or different schools. You have teachers or you know the principal. Just think about like who you know, or if you have a group of friends, who are the contacts that you guys have, and what can you guys do to meaningfully bring these people together in a way that something grows. Because once if and I would like to say that it's really important for you to be passionate about this. So if you think it's cool but you don't care too much about it, you're not going to do a very good job convincing other people that it's an important initiative, right? So if you're very passionate and you care a lot about it, and you have your core group that cares a lot about it, you each convince or persuade a few people to implement your project, whatever it may be, into their space. It's going to grow, and then from there, doors open, and then you jump at opportunities. And it's really one thing that I've learned with working with Xavier is, you take advantage of opportunities when they arise, right? And so it's being proactive, it's being passionate, and so it really does come down to you and the work that you're willing to put in. But I think that I engage with this kind of work because I think that there's so much potential and so much hope.
Is there another question? I mean, I could add to that, but I'm sure I can answer what I want to add in another question. I just want to make sure we get as many questions as you want me to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we also have some questions coming in from the comments. So Jesse wants to know, when people see your art, how do you know that they are understanding the same message that you intend to create?
Sure. So there's a couple of things. One is it's important for them to understand my message. It's more important for them to come out with their own assessment of what's going on. And I'm see if I can say it another way. I care about planting mangroves passionately. I love mangroves. As a kid, my dad would take, and mangroves are the most spectacular plants on the planet. But I don't really care about planting mangroves. I care about people planting mangroves. That's what's really important to me. In fact, I don't even care about people planting mangroves. I care about people caring about mangroves being planted. I care about people caring. That's all I'm worried about. So if my art doesn't motivate you to go into a swamp and plant mangroves, but it motivates you to fight in your city hall so that they have an electric fleet of cars, that action is going to protect my mangroves. Because mangroves also suffer with sea level rise. If it goes too high, mangrove forests die. That's happening all over the Everglades. So my goal is not for you to engage in a unilateral conversation where you're listening to me and you're not speaking. That's hardly my job. My job is to have a conversation with you so that you begin speaking, you begin acting. So that's why, for me, authorship isn't as important. In this case, we have 4 teachers and 4 sets of schools across Florida doing this project, and they're implementing it them. They have total ownership that that's their project that they're doing. And I know that each of those teachers is empowered, but each of those kids also has been motivated to act. And that is what my goal is. Again, it's about sharing ideas, but in this case, my idea is for you to have an idea. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to be cute. I really believe powerfully in what I'm saying.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. It is, what was your journey to becoming an eco artist? And then adding on to that, how did you first realize that having conversations with viewers was so important?
So I remember being in the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid back in '94. And that was a very important journey for me because when I was there, I had just given a couple of lectures there. I was a professor at the University of Miami, and I gave some speeches in Madrid, and then I was going down into Africa to give other speeches. And I remember in the museum, I stared for hours at these kinetic sculptures that were there in the museum. It was a museum that's uh, um, where you would normally see paintings and that kind of thing, but there was this kinetic sculpture. It was like a bunch of wheat, a little stick standing with yellow tips, and it was like a wheat field. But the more I moved around this sculpture, the sculpture was standing still. It's almost like there was a movie in front of me. And that piece and I were having a relationship, right? I was literally envisioning like wheat field. I mean, my brain was racing around a bunch of stuff. For all I know, the artist didn't even see a wheat field. For all I know, he was making a sunflower field. I don't know. But what he did is he engaged me through his object in an entirely different conversation. When I got to Africa, it was part of my plan already. I wanted to engage kids. I was there with the US embassies addressing issues of substance abuse. But in my project, I was bringing art pieces as a visual aid. And I remember being in Soweto, South Africa in 1994. Many of you weren't born then, but a democracy had just been born in South Africa because Mandela had just been elected president. And the US Embassy sent me there as an emissary that summer. Actually, I was there in October. He had been elected in the summer. So 3 months later, I was there. And in talking with kids in Soweto, which was then the segregated neighborhood, in the non-white neighborhood in South Africa, I've realized that having the kids paint the paintings about their issue was more impactful than the visual aids that I had brought to talk about the issue. So that interactivity, right, where I'm trying to give a message, but giving that message through a collaborative art-making process proved to be more successful. And it is in that trip in Africa in 1994 where I was convinced that I needed to turn my career around. In fact, I didn't even think of myself as an artist in 1994. I grew up in a house with artists, but I was there as a lawyer and as a professor. I wasn't there as an artist. I was using art as a visual aid. That experience in a nation that had just been transformed because of social justice transformed me into using art to engage communities. And then my work was with gangs, with juvenile justice, with AIDS, with people at society's margins, right? Until about a decade later, I started seeing the environmental degradation in Miami, and it was the mangroves. I was driving down to the Keys, and they were widening the road from Miami to the Keys. And in so doing, they were killing 18 miles of mangroves along that road. And I imagined, in future years, people will drive down this road and not realize that this lane that they're on used to be a beautiful mangrove forest, a pristine mangrove forest, because all they see is the asphalt. And that made me think about Miami Beach, where you saw all those mangroves hanging in the windows. Miami Beach was nothing but mangroves until we paved them down, just like the road I was in. So that got me to use the skills and the relationships that I had built for an entire decade along other intersections, right, around social justice, right, and apply those skills not to address the issue of gangs or juvenile justice or drunk driving, but instead to address the issue of environmental issues. Ecological art is the idea, or eco art. And that transformative aspect is what I just showed you today. So see that journey, right? Like this journey, 96, there was a point. Then in 2006, in 2004, right? 2004, I'm seeing the mangroves being destroyed. In 2006, I create this reclamation project. In 2019, now that I have learned more and I've become more aware, there's another iteration. So that also teaches you as students that it's not just about graduating from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, or from 12th grade to first year in college, but life is this beautiful journey. And along the way, different things that you do impact you. In fact, if I want to press rewind, I can take you to high school, where I started doing service at the burn unit in my local hospital. that made me a more aware, caring, and sensitive person, because I saw people that were hurting, and I was the one that was putting doing the nursing, taking care of their wounds, cleaning their burnt wounds. So over there, you start seeing a young 17-year-old boy begin to care for other people, and that just progresses to life. So the work you do now as kids in your school, right? Whatever you do for your school, those are the important part, because I'm asking you to be caring citizens. And through time, those life lessons continue to build up and build up to the point where you can build a whole beautiful life around it.
Thank you so much for that answer. So we have just about 5 minutes left, and we also have 5 questions to get through.
Okay, I'll try to answer them more succinctly, and maybe I'll throw 1 or 2 to Adam, because he speaks in sound bites. So let's do this.
Awesome. I'm going to throw in 1 or 2 at once. So to start off with, who or what is your inspiration? It's a question we had from a few people, as well as what is your next project going to be?
Okay, so my inspiration are communities that hurt and that aren't aware that they're in trouble. They motivate me to act, to worry about them. And one of those communities has nothing and everything to do with the environment, and those are children in adult prison. So I am going to be working with kids who have been tried as adults, because in many ways they are treated as if they weren't children. They're treated as adults. I started working with them 20 years ago in 2001, and this fall I'm working to find those kids who were 16 then and are now 36 years old, and see what happened to their lives when they were treated as adults. The reason it has nothing and everything to do is because the same way that you can ignore a child and treat them as an adult, which has consequences for them because they're making choices at 16 that their brains are not fully formed to make. In regards pleas and probations, I'm getting complicated. But the idea is that you don't value the life of that child. In the environmental movement, every time we vote with the fossil industry, every time we say, oh no, we need jobs, every single time that the environmental agenda gets put behind, it's the exact same thing, except it's not just prison, it's health, it's livelihood, it's our planet. So my next project does, and what I want you to understand is that as much as we love our environment and want to care about it, it's really about taking care of all the beings in this planet, including humans.
Thank you. Our next question is from Genesis. Has COVID changed your work?
So I'm going to let Adam answer that, because he has seen that firsthand. Poor guy. Because we used to be a very engaged studio. All we did was hang out with people. Adam, what's happened since March?
Yeah, as you guys can imagine, it's very hard to do participatory art when you cannot participate with anyone, or socially engaged art when you cannot socially engage. So everything has moved virtual. Everything is online. Xavier actually created, through the University of Miami, something called the Miami Corona Project, which he can talk. I mean, we only have a couple minutes, but which basically turned into an online platform of creating videos and sharing those videos, conversations, so like podcast type videos, which would then get shared to inform the community about what our leaders are seeing in regard to the pandemic and what we can do to protect ourselves. So it went, and if some of you are thinking, well, how is he doing this, Corona project when he's an eco artist and that's about health? But as you were hearing the work that he has done in the past, he was working with kids in adult prison. He was working with AIDS patients. He's worked the spectrum when it comes to social justice. So this is right up Xavier's alley. And so myself and our team have to be very adaptable, which is honestly fun because it's never boring, and we're always transitioning to what the priority is. So that unfortunately has meant being in front of a computer a lot more than I used to be. But we've been super productive, and we've been able to still have an impact even with the pandemic. there one last question? I know we're pretty much out of time.
Yep, we actually have two final questions. So hopefully we can squeeze those in. So Samantha asks, climate change is such a big issue. How can I make a difference as just one person? And how can I engage others to get involved? And the second question is, sometimes the biggest change needs to occur in some of the poorest areas. So how do you inspire these groups of people to see the importance of these issues and take part?
Adam, take the first one. I'll take the second one.
Okay, I mean, I feel like Xavier's presentation, really dove into that in terms of how can one person engage. I think it's doing a little bit of critical thinking and understanding what it is that you are passionate about. We've had, for example, last summer, the Black Lives Matter movement. If racial justice is something that you're very passionate about, you can create a socially engaged art project about that. I know this is we're talking about climate change here, but these are intersectional problems, right? So if you are passionate, you yourself take the initiative to learn on your own, to watch documentaries, to read books, to become an inspired and more knowledgeable person. You become that teacher. You help other people to learn, and you begin to lead. And that's really what we need right now. Is we need leaders who, as Xavier was saying, are creative and empathetic, and science literate. And you are going to be a light in the world, honestly. And so people will be attracted to you, and your impact grows. So I would just start with that. And when you think of, you will eventually think of an idea and think of partners and really just start to get the ball rolling. And Xavier, you can go ahead and finish with that second question.
So in Honduras, the year before I went to Africa, I remember being in a village where they call them comunas at the top of a hill. And I was there to talk about all the substance abuse and gang problems that they were having at the top in that hill. And in that conversation, we were literally talking, how do we help kids, right? One of the ladies in this shack that we're meeting in says, well, the other problem we have is that we don't have any water. And I go, what do you mean? Well, the water truck, every time it tries to go up this hill, gets stopped by the kids and they steal the guy's money. So he stopped delivering water to the top of the hill. So I said, well, your problem is water, not drugs. Make the issue about water and work with the kids on solving the problem that they and you and everyone else in this village cares about, which is we don't have any water. And you'll find the solution to the substance abuse issue by trying to figure out ways of getting the kids involved in solving the water problem, so that instead of them attacking the truck drivers to take money so that they could engage in criminal activities, everyone's now moving in a similar direction and path. So that is called reframing. And what artists do, like me planting a white flag with the elevation of your house does, is it says, yes, sea levels are rising, but it's not some problem far away. It's your house, and look at the number it's at. So reframing the issue and making it relevant matters. But before you can do any of that, you got to do research, right? You have to have some critical research so that you don't just parachute in, you don't assume, you listen. You listen to your community, you listen to the people you're trying to help, you try to analyze and find out what the problem is. And then from that perspective, not you doing it for them, but you helping them care for themselves, because now they've been motivated, they've seen, you've reframed it for them so they can see in their particular community what the problem is. They become working on it. And for that to happen, relationships matter. So a long time ago, at the beginning of this talk, we talked about people engaging with one another. It's how you build relationships that matter. And the reason I was successful in turning my work into environmental work is because I had a decade of relationships doing social justice work. So I could go back to those same libraries, those same elected officials, those same community leaders and say, this has been important. And you know who I am because you've seen me do all these things. This matters to me now. And then they follow you. Same thing at your school. If you have a relationship with some teachers, if you have a relationship with some small businesses, if you have a relationship with some clubs, you can work with those relationships you have and strengthen those relationships as you grow and grow and grow. So all of this is a very simple thing. Art is the most human thing we do. It's the most natural thing we do. It is you. You are art. Art is you. Use it to be able to communicate and be fully human. And in that process, you'll see that you will not only transform your community, but really importantly, you're going to transform yourself. You're going to transform yourself for the better. So take full advantage of that. Use it to engage others. And I can't see any of you. I wish I could. I know there's over 200 of you listening. And just to give me the opportunity to talk to 200 kids who have the future of our planet in their hand is an honor for me. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope that in some way my words and Adam's words have motivated you and your teachers into doing something really special and meaningful for your community that will be in that school a decade after you graduate. That's the plan.
Thank you very, very much, Xavier and Adam. I think we are out of time, so we have to wrap up now. But that was really incredible to learn more about all of the art you do, how you engage the community with all these social justice issues that are so critical. So just a few reminders from EarthEcho. You can join EarthEcho International on February 6th for a Youth Action Network meetup. Anyone ages 13 to 25 is welcome to come. It's on February 6th, as I said, from 2 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And through the event, you can dive into the world of ocean conservation policy, learn from and work with young environmental leaders from around the world, and gain skills to raise your voice in support of protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. So you can register by visiting earthecho.org/youth.
And be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho and scientists in every Florida school on social media. Visit our websites to find out more about all of our exciting programs, including upcoming virtual events just like this one. And before you sign off YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
On behalf of EarthEcho International and scientists in every Florida school, thank you for joining us.